Mia Chun had always known she was different, but she never expected her gift to become her curse. At 24, she possessed an ability that made her own family question her sanity. She could read dogs like others read books. Every morning. At the Seattle Animal Rescue Center, owned by her veterinarian father Dr. James Chun, Mia would walk through the kennels and instantly know which dogs were sick, which ones were about to become aggressive, and which ones needed immediate medical attention. Kennel 12, she'd tell the staff, pointing to a seemingly healthy golden retriever puppy. He'll have a seizure in about 20 minutes. Sure enough, 23 minutes later, the puppy would collapse in convulsions, leaving the veterinary technicians staring at Mia in bewilderment. But instead of admiration, her accuracy bred suspicion and resentment. Her father, a man who had built his reputation on 30 years of scientific veterinary practice, found his daughter's abilities deeply unsettling. Lucky guesses, he would mutter whenever Mia correctly predicted another medical emergency. Pattern recognition, nothing more. But Mia could see the fear in his eyes, the fear that his daughter might possess something he couldn't explain or control. The family dynamics grew more strained when Mia's older brother David returned from his residency at Harvard Medical School. David, the golden child who had followed their father's footsteps into traditional medicine, was particularly brutal in his dismissal of Mia's abilities. "Pseudoscience nonsense," he declared during a tense family dinner. "You're embarrassing." Our family name with this mystical animal whisperer act. The breaking point came during a staff meeting on a gray October morning. The shelter had been struggling financially, and Dr. Chun was considering laying off staff members. Mia, who had been quietly observing from the corner, stood up with a proposal that would change everything. What if we could train our dogs to detect human medical emergencies? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The room fell silent. "I've been researching scent detection in dogs. They can smell chemical changes in human bodies up to 45 minutes before a seizure occurs. We could train them as medical alert dogs and charge families a fraction of what traditional programs cost." The laughter that followed was both immediate and crushing. Her father's face turned red with embarrassment, and David shook his head in disgust. "Now she wants to turn our professional veterinary practice into a circus sideshow," David announced to the room. "Dogs detecting seizures? What's next? Crystal healing for cats." But Mia pressed on, despite the humiliation burning in her cheeks. "I've documented 17 instances where our shelter dogs reacted to human medical episodes before they happened. Rex, the German Shepherd in Kennel 15, always becomes agitated when Mrs. Peterson visits, and she always has a blood sugar episode within 30 minutes. Enough." Dr. Chun slammed his hand on the table. "Mia, you're here to answer phones and file paperwork. Leave the real medicine to the professionals who actually went to school for it." The words stung deeper than any physical blow could have. Mia had a psychology degree from University of Washington, graduating summa cum laude with a focus on behavioral analysis. But in her family's eyes, her education meant nothing compared to their medical degrees. After the meeting, Mia retreated to the supply closet, where she often ate lunch alone. Surrounded by dog food bags and cleaning supplies, she pulled out her notebook, a worn composition book, where she recorded every instance of unusual animal behavior she observed. The pages were filled with dates, times, and detailed descriptions of dogs alerting to human medical conditions that hadn't yet manifested. October 3rd, Bella, pit bull mix, paced and whined for 12 minutes before Mr. Rodriguez had his first panic attack. October 15th, Thor, husky, refused to leave Mrs. Kim's side. She was diagnosed with early-stage diabetes 2 weeks later. October 22nd, Princess, beagle, kept pawing at 7-year-old Emma's left side during adoption visit. Emma's appendix was removed 3 days later. Each entry represented a missed opportunity, a chance to help someone that her family dismissed as coincidence. But Mia knew better. She could see patterns that others missed, connections that traditional medicine ignored. The dogs weren't just reacting randomly. They were responding to chemical signals, behavioral cues, and subtle changes that human senses couldn't detect. The isolation was becoming unbearable. Every day, she watched her gift go unused while families struggled with medical mysteries that she might be able to solve. Her nights were filled with research scientific papers on canine olfactory capabilities, studies on seizure prediction, testimonials from families whose lives had been saved by medical alert dogs. The most painful part was knowing that her family loved her but couldn't understand her. Her father would bring her favorite coffee from the shop down the street, and David would text her funny memes from his hospital rotations. They weren't cruel people. They were just trapped in their own worldview, unable to see beyond the boundaries of traditional medicine. But Mia was determined to prove them wrong. She had spent too many sleepless nights wondering if she was crazy, too many days questioning her own perceptions. The notebook in her hands contained nearly 6 months of documentation, concrete evidence that dogs could detect human medical conditions with remarkable accuracy. As she sat in that cluttered supply closet, surrounded by the sounds of barking, dogs, and the antiseptic smell of medical equipment, Mia made a decision that would change her life forever. She was going to find a way to prove her theory, even if it meant risking everything she had left. The opportunity would come sooner than she expected, and it would involve a desperate family, a troubled German shepherd, and 2 simple words. That would revolutionize everything she thought she knew about the bond between humans and animals. But first, she had to survive the growing hostility of her own family and the crushing weight of being the only person who believed in her own abilities. The Johnson family arrived at the Seattle Animal Rescue Center on a rain-soaked Wednesday morning, their desperation hanging in the air like a fog. Mia looked up from her desk to see a woman in her 30s clutching the hand of a small boy, while a man struggled to control a massive German Shepherd mix on a frayed leash. But it was the haunted look in their eyes that made Mia's heart skip a beat, the same expression she'd seen on families facing impossible choices. "Please," the woman said, her voice cracking as she approached the front desk. "Someone told us you might be able to help. I'm Sarah Johnson, and this is my husband Mike and our son Tyler." The 7-year-old boy looked perfectly normal, swinging his legs as he sat in the waiting room chair, humming a cartoon theme song. But the German Shepherd Rex wouldn't stop staring at the child with an intensity that made Mia's skin crawl. Sarah's story began to unfold in broken whispers. Tyler had been having episodes for 8 months, sudden, violent seizures that left doctors baffled. Unlike typical seizures, Tyler's episodes came with aggressive behavior that terrified even seasoned emergency room staff. During his last attack, he had thrown a metal toy truck with such force that it left a dent in the hospital wall. "The worst part," Sarah continued, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, "is what happened to Emma." Her voice dropped to barely audible. "Our 2-year-old daughter." Tyler was playing with her in the living room when an episode started. He threw her against the coffee table. She needed 12 stitches. Mike Johnson's jaw clenched as he picked up the story. Child Protective Services opened an investigation. "They think we're abusing our children. They don't understand that Tyler can't control what happens during these episodes. We've spent our life savings on specialists, neurologists, psychiatrists. Nobody can figure out what's wrong with him." The medical mystery deepened as Sarah pulled out a thick folder of hospital records. Tyler's brain scans were normal. His blood work was perfect. EEGs showed no signs of epileptic activity. The episodes seemed to come from nowhere, lasting anywhere from 2 to 15 minutes, leaving Tyler confused and exhausted with no memory of his violent behavior. The seizures happened maybe once a week, Mike explained, his voice hollow with exhaustion. But we never know when. Tyler could be eating breakfast, playing with toys, or sleeping. There's no warning, no pattern we can identify. We're all living in constant fear. Mia found herself leaning forward, completely absorbed in the family's tragedy. This wasn't just a medical mystery. It was a family being torn apart by an invisible enemy. But what brought them to the animal shelter? Sarah's answer was both heartbreaking and desperate. A neurologist in Portland mentioned that some families use seizure alert dogs. Dogs that can sense when an episode is coming and warn the family. But those programs cost $25,000, and the waiting list is 18 months long. We don't have that kind of money or time. CPS gave us 60 days to show improvement in Tyler's safety, Mike added bitterly. If we can't prove that we can protect Emma from Tyler's episodes, they're going to place both children in foster care. We'll lose our kids. The room fell silent, except for the sound of Rex's heavy breathing. The dog had been unusually calm during the conversation. But Mia noticed something that made her pulse quicken. Every few minutes, Rex would look directly at Tyler, sniff the air, and then glance back at Sarah with what looked almost like concern. Someone at the children's hospital told us about you, Sarah said, turning to face Mia directly. They said? There was a girl here who had an unusual way with dogs, who might be able to help us train Rex to detect Tyler's episodes. We know it sounds crazy, but we're out of options. Before Mia could respond, her father emerged from an examination room. Having overheard the conversation, Dr. Chun's expression immediately hardened when he saw the family and realized what they were asking. I'm sorry, he said firmly, but we don't provide miracle cures here. What you're describing is impossible. Dogs cannot predict seizures, especially not seizures that don't show up on medical equipment. You need to focus on real medical solutions, not fantasy. Sarah's face crumpled. Please, Dr. Chun, we've tried everything else. Our son is a sweet, loving boy who would never hurt anyone when he's himself. But during these episodes, he becomes someone else entirely. If there's even a chance that Rex could give us a warning, there isn't, Dr. Chun interrupted. And I won't give you false hope. Mia, please explain to these people that we run a legitimate animal rescue, not a training facility for imaginary medical alert dogs. But Mia was studying Rex with growing fascination. The dog's behavior was unlike anything she'd seen before. He wasn't just calm, he was vigilant, protective, constantly monitoring Tyler with the focused attention of a professional. Guard. Most dogs brought to the shelter were either anxious, excited, or shut down from stress. Rex seemed to be working, even in the waiting room. How long have you had Rex? Mia asked quietly, ignoring her father's disapproving glare. 3 years. Mike replied. We got him as a puppy when Tyler was 4. He's always been protective of the kids, but lately... He paused, searching for the right words. Lately, he seems different around Tyler. More alert, more focused. Has Rex ever reacted strangely before Tyler's episodes? Mia pressed. Sarah. And Mike exchanged glances. Now that you mention it, Sarah said slowly, Rex does seem restless sometimes before Tyler has an episode. We never connected the two, but he'll pace around the house, whine, or try to get our attention for no apparent reason. Mia's heart began racing. This was exactly what she'd been documenting in her notebook: dogs exhibiting unusual behavior before human medical events. But this case was different. This family was in crisis, facing the loss of their children, and Rex might already be trying to help in ways they didn't understand. Dr. Chun, she said, her voice steady despite her father's warning look. What if we could evaluate Rex's current behavior patterns, just to see if there's any correlation between his actions and Tyler's episodes? Absolutely not, her father replied sharply. We are not giving this family false hope based on your unproven theories. I will not have our practice associated with pseudo-scientific nonsense." The rejection hit the Johnson family like a physical blow. Sarah began crying openly, while Mike's face flushed with anger and desperation. Tyler, oblivious to the adult drama, continued humming and playing with a toy car, while Rex never took his eyes off the boy. As the family prepared to leave, Sarah turned back to Mia with a look of desperate determination. "Is there any way," she whispered, "that you might be willing to help us privately? We can't pay much, but we can give you whatever we have. Our children's lives are at stake." Mia looked at her father, then at the broken family, then at Rex, a dog, whose behavior suggested he was already trying to protect a little boy from an enemy no one else could see. In that moment, she realized that this wasn't just about proving her theories anymore. This was about saving a family from destruction. "Meet me here tonight after closing," she whispered back, making a decision. That would change everything. Bring Rex and bring Tyler. The Seattle Animal Rescue Center felt like a different world after midnight. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting eerie shadows between the rows of kennels as Maya unlocked the back entrance with trembling hands. She had never defied her father so directly, but the image of Tyler Johnson's innocent face and his family's desperation had haunted her for the past 6 hours since their visit. At 12:30 a.m. sharp, a soft knock echoed through the empty facility. Mia opened the door to find the Johnson family huddled together in the rain, Rex's leash wrapped tightly around Mike's wrist. Tyler was half asleep in his father's arms, wearing Spider-Man pajamas and clutching a worn teddy bear. "Thank you," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. "We didn't know where else to turn." Mia led them to the main training room, a space typically used for basic obedience classes during the day. Under the harsh lighting, Rex looked even larger and more intimidating than he had that morning. But his eyes remained fixed on Tyler with that same protective intensity that had first caught Mia's attention. "Before we begin," Mia said, pulling out her notebook and a voice recorder, "I need to understand exactly what happens during Tyler's episodes. Every detail matters." What followed was the most comprehensive analysis of Tyler's condition that any medical professional had ever attempted. Sarah and Mike described patterns they had never connected before. Tyler's slight change in behavior about an hour before episodes, the way his left hand would twitch almost imperceptibly, how his speech would become slightly slurred in a way that sounded like tiredness rather than a medical symptom. "He also smells different," Sarah admitted, looking embarrassed. "I know that sounds crazy, but about 30 minutes before an episode, Tyler develops this sweet, almost metallic smell, like pennies mixed with fruit juice. The doctors think I'm imagining it." Mia's pulse quickened. She had read about this phenomenon, ketogenic changes in brain chemistry that dogs could detect through scent alone, before human medical equipment could measure them. "Has Rex ever reacted to this smell?" she asked. Mike nodded slowly. "Now that you mention it, Rex does seem agitated when Tyler has that smell. He'll pace around Tyler, sometimes whine or paw at him. We always thought he was just being clingy." This was exactly what Mia had hoped to hear, but the real challenge lay ahead. She had studied seizure alert dog training extensively, but she had never actually trained one. Professional programs took 18 months and cost thousands of dollars because the process was incredibly complex and failure rates were high. "Need to be completely honest with you," Mia said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I've never done this before. I understand the theory. I've researched the methods, but Tyler will be my first real case." "If this doesn't work, it has to work," Sarah interrupted, tears streaming down her face. "CPS is coming back in 53 days. If Tyler has another violent episode before then, we lose both our children forever." The weight of that responsibility settled on Mia's shoulders like a lead blanket. She was risking not just her own career and family relationships, but the future of two innocent children. But looking at Rex, who hadn't taken his eyes off Tyler since entering the building, she felt a familiar stirring of certainty, a sane intuitive knowledge that had guided her through countless successful predictions. The first step was establishing a baseline understanding of Rex's natural responses. Mia had brought several items from Tyler's room pillowcases, shirts, toys that might carry the scent markers associated with his episodes. She also had video footage that Sarah had secretly recorded during Tyler's last episode, hoping to show doctors patterns they might have missed. "Rex, come here," Mia called softly. The German shepherd approached cautiously, clearly unsure about the strange nighttime environment. But when Mia held out Tyler's pillowcase, Rex's entire demeanor changed. His nostrils flared, his ears perked up, and he made a low whining sound that seemed almost conversational. "He recognizes something," Mike observed, amazement creeping into his voice. Mia pulled out her phone and began playing audio from one of Tyler's episodes, the sound of his rapid breathing and incoherent mumbling that preceded the violent phase. Rex's reaction was immediate and startling. He backed away from the phone, then circled back to Tyler, placing his large body between the sleeping boy and the source of the disturbing sounds. "He's already protective," Mia murmured, making notes as fast as she could write. "Now we need to teach him to communicate what he's sensing in a way that will give you warning time." The training process that followed was unlike anything depicted in movies or television. It required patience, repetition, and a deep understanding of canine psychology that Mia had been developing her entire life. Using positive reinforcement techniques, she began teaching Rex to associate Tyler's pre-seizure scent markers with specific behaviors that the family could easily recognize. The breakthrough came during their third midnight session, a week after they'd started. Tyler had fallen asleep on the training room mat while his parents worked with Rex and Mia. Around 2:15 a.m., Rex suddenly became alert, sniffing the air with increased intensity. Mia had prepared for this moment, developing a simple two-word command that would test Rex's detection abilities. "Show me," she whispered to Rex, her heart pounding as she spoke the words she had chosen as their special signal. Rex immediately walked to Tyler and sat beside him, then looked back at Mia with unmistakable purpose. The dog's behavior was clear and deliberate, not the random alertness of an anxious pet, but the focused attention of an animal who had detected something specific. "Is Tyler okay?" Sarah asked, rushing to her son's side. Tyler appeared to be sleeping peacefully, but Mia noticed subtle signs that matched Sarah's earlier descriptions. A slight change in his breathing pattern, an almost imperceptible tension in his facial muscles, and yes, that faint, sweet metallic smell that Sarah had mentioned. "We need to wake him up gently and get him some water," Mia said, her voice tight with controlled excitement. "And we need to time this carefully." 26 minutes later, Tyler experienced a mild episode, not one of his violent attacks, but the confused, disoriented state that sometimes preceded them. This time, however, the family was prepared. Sarah was able to administer the emergency medication that doctors had prescribed, but which had never been effective because they could never predict when to give it. The episode lasted only 90 seconds instead of Tyler's usual 10 to 15 minutes, and he remained calm throughout. When it was over, he looked up at his parents with clear, focused eyes, something that had never happened after a seizure before. "It worked," Mike whispered, staring at Rex in amazement. He actually predicted it. But Mia knew this was only the beginning. One successful prediction didn't constitute reliable medical detection. They needed consistency, accuracy, and most importantly, they needed to refine Rex's alert behavior so that it would work in the chaotic environment of daily family life, not just the controlled setting of midnight training sessions. As the Johnson family prepared to leave that night, Mia felt a mixture of exhilaration and terror. She had just witnessed something that challenged everything her father and brother believed about the limitations of animal behavior. But she also knew that the real test was yet to come, and that the clock was still ticking toward that CPS deadline that would determine the fate of 2 innocent children. "Same time tomorrow night?" Sarah asked hopefully. Mia nodded already, mentally preparing for the challenges ahead. She had no idea that her father had already begun to suspect her unauthorized activities, or that her midnight training sessions were about to be discovered in the most dramatic way possible. The call came at 2:17 a.m. on a Thursday night, piercing through Mia's dreams like a scream. She fumbled for her phone, her heart already racing before she heard Sarah Johnson's voice broken, desperate, barely recognizable through her sobs. "Mia, please ... We need you at Seattle Children's Hospital. Something's wrong with Tyler. The seizure ... It won't stop. They're saying." Sarah's voice dissolved into incoherent crying, and Mike took the phone. "It's been going on for 12 minutes, Mike said, his voice hollow with terror. "This is the longest one ever. The doctors are talking about induced coma, about possible brain damage. They keep asking us what's different, what changed, but we can't tell them about Rex without sounding insane." Mia was already pulling on clothes, her mind racing through the implications. Their training had been progressing well for 2 weeks. Rex had successfully predicted 4 minor episodes, giving the family precious warning time that had prevented any violent outbursts. But this call shattered everything she thought she understood about Tyler's condition. "I'm on my way," she said, grabbing Rex's leash and her training supplies. "Bring Rex to the hospital. I don't care what the rules are, we need him there." The drive to Seattle Children's Hospital through empty streets felt like a nightmare. Mia's hands shook on the steering wheel as she thought about Tyler lying in a hospital bed, his young brain under assault from electrical storms that medical science couldn't explain or stop. Worse, she couldn't shake the feeling that somehow their training had failed when it mattered most. The pediatric emergency department was a controlled chaos of medical personnel when Mia arrived. She found the Johnson family in the hallway outside, Tyler's room, looking like refugees from their own lives. Sarah was curled in a chair, rocking back and forth, while Mike paced frantically with Rex on a tight leash. The German shepherd looked as distressed as his human family, whining and pulling toward Tyler's room. "They won't let Rex inside," Mike explained, his voice cracking. Security almost removed him from the building. I had to lie and say he was a service dog. Through the window, Mia could see Tyler's small form surrounded by machines and medical staff. Electrodes covered his scalp, monitoring brain activity that displayed in violent, chaotic waves on multiple screens. A neurologist was adjusting medication. Drips while nurses tracked vital signs that painted a picture of a young brain in crisis. What triggered this? Mia asked, studying Rex's behavior. The dog was exhibiting signs she had never seen before. Not just alertness, but genuine distress. His ears were flattened against his head, and he kept looking between Tyler's room and the family as if trying to communicate something urgent. "That's just it," Sarah said, looking up with red-rimmed eyes. There was no trigger. Tyler was sleeping peacefully. Rex never gave us any warning. We woke up to Tyler screaming and thrashing in his bed. By the time the ambulance arrived, he'd been seizing for 8 minutes. A chill ran down Mia's spine. In all their training sessions, Rex had never failed to detect an oncoming episode. His accuracy had been improving steadily, giving the family 20 to 30 minutes of warning time. For him to miss such a severe seizure suggested something fundamental had changed. Dr. Martinez, the attending neurologist, emerged from Tyler's room with an expression that made Mia's stomach drop. "The seizure activity is finally decreasing," he announced, "but we're looking at potential complications. Seizures lasting longer than 10 minutes can cause permanent brain damage. We need to understand what caused this escalation." As the medical team discussed treatment options, Mia found herself studying Rex with growing alarm. The dog's behavior wasn't just distressed, it was confused, almost frustrated. He kept sniffing the air around Tyler's room, then shaking his head as if he couldn't process what his senses were telling him. "Can I bring Rex closer to Tyler?" Mia asked Dr. Martinez. "I know it sounds unusual, but there might be behavioral indicators that could help with diagnosis." The neurologist looked skeptical. "This is a critical care situation. We can't have animals interfering with medical equipment." "Please," Mike interrupted. "Rex has been helping us predict Tyler's episodes. He's never been wrong before. Maybe he can tell us something the machines can't." Dr. Martinez studied the desperate family and looked at the monitors showing Tyler's slowly stabilizing brain activity. 5 minutes, he decided. But the dog stays on a leash, and if he interferes with any equipment, he's out immediately. As they entered Tyler's room, Rex's behavior became even more puzzling. Instead of his usual protective positioning near Tyler, the dog seemed almost afraid to approach the bed. He sniffed cautiously, backed away, then tried again, whining softly in what sounded like confusion. Mia knelt beside Rex and whispered the command that had become their secret signal. "Show me." Rex's response was unlike anything she had witnessed before. Instead of alerting to Tyler, the dog turned and walked directly to Tyler's overnight bag in the corner of the room. He sat beside it and looked back at Mia with unmistakable purpose. "What's he doing?" Sarah asked, following Rex's gaze to the bag. Mia approached the bag slowly, her mind racing through possibilities. Inside were Tyler's normal overnight items: pajamas, his teddy bear, some snacks, and his medication. But as she examined each item, Rex became increasingly agitated, pawing specifically at Tyler's medication bottle. "When did Tyler last take his seizure medication?" Mia asked, holding up the prescription bottle. "Right before bed," Sarah replied. "Same as always. Dr. Patel prescribed it 3 months ago, but it's never really helped much." Mia examined the label more closely, and her blood ran cold. The medication was Lamictal, an anti-seizure drug, but the dosage seemed wrong for Tyler's weight and age. More concerning, the fill date was only 2 days ago, meaning Tyler had been switched to a new batch of medication. Right around the time, Rex started showing signs of confusion. "Dr. Martinez," Mia called urgently. "Could you check if there's been any change in Tyler's medication recently? Rex is alerting to his prescription bottle, and his behavior suggests something is chemically different." The neurologist took the bottle and examined it carefully. Within minutes, he was on the phone with the hospital pharmacy, his voice growing increasingly tense. When he hung up, his expression was grim. "There's been a manufacturing error," he announced. "This batch of Lamictal was recalled yesterday due to inconsistent dosing. Some pills contained double the intended medication, others contained none at all. Tyler has been getting wildly irregular doses for the past week." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Tyler's worsening condition hadn't been a failure of Rex's detection abilities. It had been caused by inconsistent medication. That was making his brain chemistry unpredictable. Rex had been trying to alert to something that wasn't following any natural pattern. "The good news," Dr. Martinez continued, "is that once we stabilize his system with consistent medication, Tyler should return to his baseline condition. The bad news is that this episode was severe enough to require several days of monitoring." As Tyler slowly awakened from the medicated sleep and had finally stopped his seizure, Rex's behavior immediately returned to normal. The dog approached the bed calmly, sniffed Tyler gently, and settled into his familiar protective position. For the first time in days, Rex seemed at peace. "He knew something was wrong," Sarah whispered in amazement. "Even when we couldn't figure it out, Rex knew the medication was the problem." Mia looked at Rex with new respect and understanding. She had been training him to detect Tyler's natural seizure patterns, but his intelligence went far beyond simple scent detection. He had been trying to tell them that something artificial was interfering with Tyler's normal chemistry, something that their training hadn't prepared them for. But as Tyler's condition stabilized and the family began to feel hopeful again, Mia received a text message that made her blood freeze. "My office. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. sharp. We need to discuss your unauthorized activities." Dad, her father had discovered her secret training sessions, and judging by his tone, the confrontation was going to determine not just her future at the animal rescue, but whether the Johnson family would be allowed to continue working with Rex at all. The battle for Tyler's life had been won, but the war for Mia's revolutionary approach to canine medical detection was just beginning. Mia's hands were still trembling from lack of sleep when she arrived at the Seattle Animal Rescue Center at 7:45 a.m. Through the windows of her father's office, she could see Dr. Chun pacing behind his desk, her secret training notebook spread open before him alongside printed security camera footage. Her brother David sat in the corner chair, his medical school blazer perfectly pressed, wearing the disappointed expression that had haunted Mia's childhood. The confrontation she had been dreading for weeks was finally here, and the timing couldn't have been worse. Tyler Johnson was stable, but still hospitalized. Rex had proven his abilities in the most traumatic way possible, and Child Protective Services was scheduled to visit the Johnson family in exactly 37 days. Everything hung in the balance. "Sit down, Mia," Dr. Chun said without looking up from her notebook. His voice carried the controlled fury of a man who felt his professional reputation had been compromised. "I've spent the last hour reading your detailed documentation of these unauthorized training sessions. Security footage confirms you've been using our facility for unsanctioned activities every night for the past 2 weeks." David leaned forward, shaking his head with the same condescending expression he'd worn since childhood. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You've involved our family practice in unproven medical interventions. If something goes wrong with that boy, we could face lawsuits, license reviews, even criminal charges for practicing medicine without proper credentials." Mia took a deep breath, knowing that this moment would determine not just her future, but Tyler's as well. "Dad, I know you're angry, but you need to understand what Rex accomplished last night. He detected a pharmaceutical manufacturing error that the hospital missed. Tyler's medication was compromised, and Rex identified the source when trained. Neurologists couldn't enough." Dr. Chun slammed his hand on the desk. "I don't want to hear about miraculous dog predictions. This family came to us desperate and vulnerable, and you exploited their emotional state to conduct illegal experiments. You've endangered a child's life based on pseudoscientific theories that have no basis in legitimate medicine." The words hit Mia like physical blows, but she forced herself to remain calm. Everything she had worked for, everything she believed about the connection between animals and human health, was being reduced to dangerous fantasy by the two people whose approval she had craved her entire life. "The Johnson family will be here in an hour," Dr. Chun continued. "I've arranged this meeting to formally terminate any relationship between our practice and their family. You will return any training materials, cease all contact with them, and apologize for giving them false hope." As if summoned by his words, the sound of car doors slamming echoed from the parking lot. Through the window, Mia could see the Johnson family approaching the building. Mike was carrying Tyler, who looked pale but alert after his hospital discharge that morning. Sarah walked beside them holding Rex's leash, her face showing the exhaustion of 3 sleepless nights in a hospital chair. But what Dr. Chun and David couldn't see from their position was Tyler's condition. Even from a distance, Mia could observe the subtle signs she had learned to recognize. The slight tremor in Tyler's left hand, the way he was leaning heavily against his father, and most telling of all, Rex's behavior. The German Shepherd was in full alert mode, constantly checking on Tyler, his body language screaming warnings that everyone except Mia was trained to ignore. "They're here," Mia said quietly, "and Rex is detecting something. Tyler's going to have an episode soon." David laughed bitterly, still maintaining the fantasy right up until the end. "There's no dog alerting to anything. You're seeing patterns that don't exist because you want to believe in something that isn't real." The Johnson family entered the building, and Mia could see the confusion on their faces as they realized this wasn't a regular training session. Sarah looked between Dr. Chun's stern expression and Mia's pale face, understanding immediately that something had gone terribly wrong. "Dr. Chun," Mike said carefully, "we can't thank you enough for what Mia has done for our family. Rex saved Tyler's life last night by identifying the medication problem. We're here to discuss expanding the training program and perhaps helping other families." "There will be no expanding program," Dr. Chun interrupted. "My daughter has been conducting unauthorized medical experiments without proper supervision or credentials. As of today, all contact between our practice and your family is terminated." The devastation on Sarah's face was heartbreaking. "Please, Dr. Chun, you don't understand. Rex gave us our lives back. For the first time in months, we had hope. Tyler hasn't had a violent episode since the training began. That's coincidence, not causation," David interjected. "Any perceived improvements are likely due to placebo effect and confirmation bias. Dogs cannot predict medical events, and continuing to believe otherwise is dangerous for your son." But Mia was watching Rex, not the argument. The dog's alertness had escalated to urgent concern. He was pacing around Tyler, occasionally looking directly at the adults as if trying to communicate something critical. Tyler himself seemed completely normal, sitting in a chair and coloring in a book his mother had brought. But Mia could see the signs that everyone else was missing. This was the moment she had been training for, not just to prove Rex's abilities, but to demonstrate that some forms of knowledge couldn't be learned from textbooks or medical journals. It required intuition, observation, and trust in connections that science was only beginning to understand. "Rex is alerting right now," Mia said quietly, interrupting the heated discussion. "Tyler's going to have an episode within the next few minutes." The room fell silent. Dr. Chun's face flushed with anger, while David shook his head in disgust. Sarah and Mike looked between Rex and Tyler, recognizing the dog's behavior from their training sessions, but seeing no obvious signs of distress in their son. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," Dr. Chun said, making dramatic predictions. "Based on normal dog behavior, Tyler appears completely fine, and you're creating anxiety for his parents based on." Rex interrupted by walking directly to Tyler and sitting beside him with unmistakable purpose. The dog's entire body language had shifted into the focused attention that Mia had been training him to demonstrate. This was the moment that would either validate everything she believed or destroy her credibility forever. Mia knelt beside Rex, aware that everyone in the room was watching her every move. Her father's career, Tyler's safety, and her own future all hinged on what happened next. With a voice that barely masked her racing heartbeat, she spoke the two words that had become their secret signal: "Show me." Rex immediately placed his paw on Tyler's leg and looked directly at Mia, then at Sarah. The behavior was clear, deliberate, and unmistakable, exactly the alert sequence they had practiced dozens of times during their midnight training sessions. Tyler continued coloring, apparently oblivious to the tension in the room. To everyone except Mia and the Johnson parents, Rex's behavior looked like normal pet interaction. But Mia could see the subtle changes that confirmed Rex's alert. Tyler's breathing had become slightly shallow. His left hand showed that familiar tremor. And yes, there was that faint metallic smell that Sarah had learned to recognize. 30 seconds, Mia announced, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. Tyler will begin showing symptoms within 30 seconds. Dr. Chon's face darkened with fury. This is unconscionable. You're traumatizing this family with dramatic predictions that have no basis in. His words were cut short as Tyler's crayon slipped from his fingers. The 7-year-old looked up with a confused expression, his eyes losing focus as the familiar blank stare that preceded his episodes began to take hold. Tyler? Sarah said urgently, moving to her son's side as she had been trained to do. 23 seconds after Rex's alert, Tyler's body began the subtle tremors that marked the beginning of a seizure episode. But this time, the family was prepared. Sarah administered Tyler's emergency medication while Mike positioned him safely, and Rex remained calmly beside the boy, providing both physical support and emotional comfort. The episode lasted only 45 seconds, the shortest Tyler had experienced in over a year, and he remained conscious throughout. When it was over, he looked up at his parents with clear eyes and asked if he could finish his coloring. The silence in the room was deafening. Dr. Chon stared at Rex in disbelief while David's confident smirk had completely disappeared. The Johnson family, despite having witnessed Rex's abilities many times before, still looked amazed at the precision of his prediction. How did you know? Dr. Chun asked quietly, his anger replaced by stunned confusion. Mia looked at her father, then at Rex, who had resumed his protective position beside Tyler, as if nothing unusual had happened. Because I listened, she said. Simply. And because Rex has been trying to tell us all along. We just needed to learn his language. The silence that followed Tyler's episode felt like standing in the eye of a hurricane. Dr. Chun stared at his stopwatch, the same stopwatch he had been reflexively using to time medical procedures for 30 years, with an expression of complete bewilderment. 43 seconds. From Rex's alert to the onset of Tyler's seizure activity, exactly 43 seconds had elapsed. That's impossible, David whispered, his medical school training crashing against the evidence he had just witnessed. Seizure prediction with that level of accuracy. It doesn't exist in human medicine. The best EEG equipment can only detect changes seconds before onset, not nearly a minute. But the proof was undeniable. Tyler sat contentedly in his chair, finishing his coloring book as if nothing had happened, while Rex maintained his protective position with the calm professionalism of a trained medical professional. The German Shepherd's accuracy had surpassed anything that existed in modern neurology. Dr. Chon slowly approached Rex, studying the dog with the same clinical intensity he usually reserved for examining patients. The timing was too precise. To be coincidental, he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. And the dog's behavior was clearly intentional, not random. Sarah Johnson pulled out her phone, her hands shaking with excitement. I've been documenting every episode since we started working with Mia. This is the 15th time Rex has predicted one of Tyler's seizures. His accuracy rate is 97%, and he's never had a false positive. 15 times? Doctor. Chun's voice cracked with disbelief. You've documented 15 successful predictions? Mike nodded, pulling up videos on his phone. We have it all recorded. Rex typically gives us 20 to 30 minutes of warning time. This was actually one of his shorter alerts. Usually we have enough time to get Tyler comfortable and administer medication before anything happens. David stood up abruptly, pacing to the window as his worldview underwent a fundamental shift. Do you understand what you're telling us? You're claiming that a family pet can outperform medical equipment that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's not just unlikely, it's revolutionary. Mia felt a surge of vindication mixed with terror. She had dreamed of this moment, her family finally acknowledging her abilities, but the reality was overwhelming. "It's not just Rex," she said, quietly. "I've documented similar behaviors in 17 other dogs at the shelter. Dogs alerting to diabetic episodes, heart arrhythmias, even early-stage cancers. We've been dismissing these behaviors as random when they're actually sophisticated medical detection." Dr. Chun's phone buzzed with an incoming call. He glanced at the screen, and his face went pale. "It's Dr. Martinez from Seattle Children's Hospital," he announced. "He wants to speak with us about Tyler's case." The room fell silent as Dr. Chun answered the call on speaker. Dr. Martinez's voice filled the office with barely contained excitement. "Dr. Chun, I need to know more about the dog that detected Tyler's medication problem last night. What we witnessed was unlike anything in my 25 years of pediatric neurology." "I'm not sure I understand," Dr. Chun replied carefully. "The dog identified a pharmaceutical manufacturing error that our entire medical team missed," Dr. Martinez continued. "We've reviewed Tyler's case with specialists from 3 major medical centers, and the consensus is unanimous. That dog demonstrated diagnostic capabilities that exceed current medical technology. We need to understand how this training works." Sarah stepped forward. "Dr. Martinez, this is Sarah Johnson. Rex didn't just detect the medication problem. He's been predicting Tyler's seizures for weeks. We have detailed documentation of his accuracy. Mrs. Johnson, I need you to understand something." Dr. Martinez's voice grew serious. "Tyler's case has attracted attention from neurologists across the country. The Department of Health and Human Services has contacted us about the potential implications of canine medical detection. If your dog can truly predict seizures with the accuracy you're describing, this could change pediatric neurology forever." The weight of Dr. Martinez's words settled over the room like a heavy blanket. This was no longer about one family or one dog. They were discussing a potential medical breakthrough that could affect thousands of children suffering from unpredictable seizures. "There's more," Dr. Martinez continued. "I've been contacted by researchers from Johns Hopkins and Mayo Clinic. They want to study your dog's detection methods. There's talk of clinical trials, research grants, possibly even FDA approval for canine seizure detection programs." David's medical training finally overcame his skepticism. "Dr. Martinez, this is David Chun, Dr. Chun's son. I'm completing my neurology residency at Harvard. What kind of accuracy rates are we discussing?" "Based on the documentation the Johnson family provided, we're looking at prediction accuracy that exceeds 95%, with warning times ranging from 20 to 45 minutes before seizure onset. To put that in perspective, our best medical equipment provides maybe 30 seconds of warning, and only for certain types of seizures." Mia watched her father's expression transform as the implications became clear. This wasn't about his daughter's unusual intuition anymore. This was about a medical discovery that could save lives and revolutionize treatment for neurological conditions. "Dr. Martinez," Dr. Chun said slowly, "if we were to consider expanding this program, what would be required for proper medical validation?" "Comprehensive documentation, controlled studies, collaboration with certified medical facilities," Dr. Martinez replied immediately. "But Dr. Chun, based on what I witnessed last night, I believe this program could be operational within months, not years. The Johnson family has essentially completed the proof of concept phase." Tyler looked up from his coloring book, apparently sensing that the adults were discussing something important. "Is Rex in trouble?" he asked innocently. "He's a good dog. He helps me feel safe." The simple honesty of Tyler's words cut through all the medical jargon and research possibilities. This wasn't just about scientific breakthroughs or professional recognition. It was about a 7-year-old boy who could finally live without fear of unpredictable, violent seizures. Sarah knelt beside her son. "Rex isn't in trouble, sweetheart. The doctors want to learn from him so he can help other children too." "Like me?" Tyler asked hopefully. "Exactly like you," Sarah replied, tears streaming down her face. Dr. Chun closed his phone and looked directly at Mia for the first time since the confrontation began. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "And apparently, I owe you a research partnership." "Dad," Mia began, but he held up his hand. "No, let me finish. For 30 years, I've practiced medicine based on what I learned in medical school, what I could prove with tests and equipment. But you've shown me that sometimes the most important discoveries come from observing what everyone else dismisses as impossible." He turned to address the Johnson family. "If you're willing, I'd like to propose that we formalize this program. Proper documentation, medical oversight, collaboration with researchers. We could help other families while ensuring that Tyler receives the best possible care." Rex, as if sensing that his role had fundamentally changed, stood up and walked to Dr. Chun. The dog sat beside him and looked up with the same focused attention he showed Tyler, as if recognizing that this man was now part of his mission to protect children. "I think Rex approves," Mike said with a smile. David shook his head in amazement. 43 seconds. A dog predicted a medical event 43 seconds before our best technology could detect it. "I need to call my professors at Harvard. They're not going to believe this." As the room buzzed with plans for research protocols and medical partnerships, Mia realized that the most important transformation wasn't in the program's future. It was in the relationships around her. Her father was looking at her with respect. Instead of disappointment, David was asking for her input instead of dismissing her ideas. And the Johnson family was facing a future where Tyler's condition was manageable instead of terrifying. But the real validation came from Rex himself, who returned to Tyler's side and resumed his vigilant watch. The dog didn't care about research grants or medical recognition. He had a job to do, and he would continue doing it with the quiet professionalism that had started this entire revolution. 43 seconds had changed everything. 3 weeks after the confrontation that changed everything, the Seattle Animal Rescue Center had transformed into something resembling a medical research facility. Camera crews from CNN and Good Morning America had parked outside since dawn. While inside, Dr. Chun found himself fielding calls from veterinary schools, children's hospitals, and research institutions across the country. The quiet family practice that had dismissed Mia's theories was now the epicenter of a medical revolution. Mia stood in the main training room, watching Rex work with his newest student, a young border collie named Luna, who was being trained to detect diabetic episodes for 10-year-old Marcus Williams. The boy's family had driven from Portland after seeing the Johnson family's story on the national news. In just 3 weeks, 37 families had contacted the center, each desperate for hope that traditional medicine couldn't provide. The transformation has been remarkable, Dr. Elena Rodriguez from Johns Hopkins announced to the assembled medical team. She had arrived 2 days earlier to begin the formal clinical trials that would potentially revolutionize seizure detection protocols. Rex's prediction accuracy remains at 97% across 43 documented episodes. We've never seen anything approaching this level of precision in seizure prediction. Tyler Johnson, now the poster child for canine medical detection, sat in the corner of the room working on homework while Rex maintained his protective vigil. The boy's life had changed dramatically, not just because his seizures were now predictable and manageable, but because his family's story had given hope to thousands of other children facing similar medical mysteries. The most significant development, Dr. Rodriguez continued, is that Rex's training methods appear to be replicable. Mia has successfully trained 4 additional dogs using identical techniques with comparable accuracy rates. This isn't a one-dog miracle, it's a systematic approach that could be scaled nationwide. David Chun, who had returned from Harvard to help document the research protocols, shook his head in continued amazement. 6 months ago, I would have called this pseudoscience. Now I'm co-authoring papers with some of the most respected neurologists in the country. The medical community is completely re-evaluating what we thought we knew about seizure prediction. But the most remarkable transformation had occurred in Dr. Chun himself. The man who had built his career on traditional veterinary medicine was now advocating for approaches that challenged everything he had learned in veterinary school. His respect for Mia's abilities had evolved into genuine partnership, and their father-daughter relationship had healed in ways that neither had expected. The Child Protective Service's hearing yesterday was the final validation, Sarah Johnson announced to the room, her voice thick with emotion. After reviewing 6 weeks of documentation showing Tyler's complete seizure control, they officially closed their investigation. Our family is whole again, and it's entirely because of what Mia and Rex accomplished. The CPS hearing had indeed been a watershed moment. When caseworkers arrived expecting to evaluate Tyler's safety, they instead found a child whose medical condition was so well managed that he hadn't experienced a single violent episode since beginning the program. Rex's predictions had allowed the family to administer preventive medication with perfect timing, eliminating the dangerous seizures that had threatened to tear the family apart. We've received preliminary approval from the FDA for expanded trials, Dr. Martinez announced via video conference from Seattle Children's Hospital. 3 major children's hospitals have agreed to participate in controlled studies. If the results match what we've observed with Tyler, we could see FDA approval for therapeutic canine programs within 18 months. The implications were staggering. Instead of families waiting years and spending tens of thousands of dollars for professionally trained seizure dogs, children could potentially receive life-saving detection services from their own pets, trained using Mia's protocols at a fraction of the cost. But success brought unexpected challenges. The phone rang constantly with requests from desperate families, media interviews, and research proposals. Mia found herself overwhelmed by the attention, struggling to balance her sudden fame with the quiet, intuitive work that had started everything. The hardest part, Mia confided to her father during a rare quiet moment, is remembering that this was never about proving I was right. It was about helping children like Tyler. Sometimes I worry that all the attention is making us lose sight of what's really important. Dr. Chun nodded thoughtfully. That's exactly why you're the right person to lead this program. Fame and recognition don't change your fundamental motivation. Helping animals help people. The validation Mia had craved from her family had finally arrived, but in a way she never expected. Instead of simply acknowledging her abilities, her father had become her strongest advocate, defending her methods to skeptical colleagues and ensuring that the research maintained the highest scientific standards. Dr. Chun called a voice from the doorway. Rebecca Martinez, a researcher from the University of Washington, entered carrying a stack of preliminary study results. The comparative analysis is complete. Mia's training methods produce detection accuracy rates that exceed anything in current medical literature. We're recommending immediate expansion to a multi-state pilot program. The pilot program would involve 20 families across 5 states, each with children suffering from unpredictable seizures. If successful, it would provide the evidence needed for nationwide implementation of canine seizure detection programs. There's something else, Rebecca continued, her excitement barely contained. The scent detection research has revealed something unexpected. The dogs aren't just detecting pre-seizure chemical changes. They're identifying specific neurological patterns that our medical equipment can't measure. This could lead to entirely new approaches to seizure prediction and treatment. Tyler looked up from his homework, seeming to sense that the adults were discussing something important. "Are you talking about Rex?" he asked with the straightforward curiosity of a 7-year-old. "We're talking about how Rex is going to help other kids like you," Mia replied, kneeling beside Tyler's chair. "That's good," Tyler said matter-of-factly. "Every kid should have a dog like Rex. He makes everything better." The simple wisdom of Tyler's words reminded everyone in the room why they were there. Behind all the research protocols, media attention, and scientific validation was a fundamental truth. A dog's love and protection could transform a child's life in ways that medicine alone couldn't achieve. Rex, as if responding to Tyler's praise, walked over and placed his head on the boy's lap. The gesture was both affectionate and professional, a reminder that despite all the attention and accolades, his primary job remained unchanged, protecting Tyler. "The media wants to know when we'll be ready for the next phase," David announced, checking his phone. 60 Minutes wants to do a feature story, and there are requests for Mia to speak at medical conferences across the country. Mia looked around the room at Tyler calmly doing homework under Rex's protection, at her father coordinating with researchers, at David documenting protocols that would help other families. 6 weeks ago, she had been filing paperwork and answering phones, dismissed as a dreamer with unscientific ideas. Now she was the leader of a medical breakthrough that could change thousands of lives. "Tell them we'll be ready when we're ready," Mia replied. "Our first responsibility is to the families who need help now. The recognition and fame can wait." As if to emphasize her point, Luna the border collie suddenly became alert, focusing intently on Marcus Williams. The 10-year-old looked completely normal, playing with a toy truck, but Luna's behavior was unmistakable. "Show me," Mia said quietly to Luna. The dog immediately sat beside Marcus and looked back at Mia, then at the boy's mother. Within 2 minutes, Marcus showed signs of low blood sugar that would have gone undetected until he collapsed. Another successful prediction. Another child protected. Another family given hope. The revolution was no longer about proving Mia's theories. It was about saving lives, one prediction at a time. 1 year later, Mia Chun stood before a packed auditorium at the International Conference on Pediatric Neurology in Boston, looking out at an audience of the world's most distinguished medical professionals. The woman who had once been dismissed as a dreamer with pseudo-scientific theories was now being introduced as the pioneer who had revolutionized seizure detection and saved hundreds of lives across North America. Dr. Chun's Canine Medical Alert Program has achieved what many thought impossible, the conference moderator announced. In 12 months, her training protocols have been implemented in 43 states, trained over 200 dogs, and provided life-saving detection services to families who had exhausted all traditional medical options. The statistics were staggering, but behind each number was a story like Tyler Johnson's, a child whose life had been transformed from terror to normalcy, a family given hope where none had existed before. Tyler himself, now 8 years old, and seizure-free for 14 months, sat in the front row with his parents and Rex, who wore a special therapy dog vest that had become the symbol of the program. "The most remarkable aspect of our success," Mia began, her voice carrying the confidence that came from having saved so many lives, "is not the scientific breakthrough, but the simple truth that sometimes the most revolutionary discoveries come from trusting what traditional medicine dismisses." 1 year ago, a desperate family brought their son and their dog to our clinic, and that encounter changed everything we thought we knew about the relationship between animals and human health. The presentation that followed detailed a year of unprecedented medical breakthroughs. The pilot program had expanded beyond seizure detection to include diabetes alert dogs, cardiac event prediction, and even early cancer detection. Universities across the country had established canine medical detection programs, and the FDA had fast-tracked approval for therapeutic animal protocols that could have taken decades under normal circumstances. But the most profound change had occurred in Tyler Johnson himself. The boy who had once been a danger to his own sister was now helping train other children's dogs, teaching them the hand signals and commands that could save their lives. His natural empathy and understanding of what other kids were going through made him an invaluable part of the program. Tyler has become our youngest trainer, Sarah Johnson explained during her portion of the presentation. Children relate to him in ways that adults can't replicate. When he tells another kid that their dog will keep them safe, they believe it completely, because they can see that Rex has kept Tyler safe. The Johnson family had become ambassadors for the program, traveling to children's hospitals and speaking at medical conferences. Their story had been featured in medical journals, documentary films, and educational programs used in veterinary and medical schools. But more importantly, they had become a beacon of hope for families facing similar medical mysteries. Dr. Chun, now recognized as a leading authority on animal-assisted medical intervention, had transformed the Seattle Animal Rescue Center into the Chun Institute for Canine Medical Detection. The facility that had once struggled financially now received grants from major medical foundations and had a waiting list of families seeking training services. The relationship between Mia and myself has evolved far beyond father and daughter, Dr. Chun told the audience during his portion of the presentation. She is now my colleague, my research partner, and quite frankly, my teacher. She has shown me that some of the most important medical advances come not from expensive equipment or pharmaceutical research, but from careful observation of the natural world. David Chun, who had completed his neurology residency and joined the Institute as head of medical research, presented the scientific data that had convinced even the most skeptical members of the medical community. Our dogs now consistently achieve prediction accuracy rates of 98.4% across multiple medical conditions. To put this in perspective, our best medical equipment achieves roughly 60% accuracy for seizure prediction. The audience of neurologists, pediatricians, and researchers listened with rapt attention as David described case studies that read like medical miracles. Children who had been facing brain surgery were now living normal lives with their canine partners. Families that had been bankrupted by medical bills were receiving life-saving detection services for the cost of basic dog training. But the presentation's most powerful moment came when Mia introduced the program's latest success story. Emma Rodriguez, a 6-year-old girl from Texas, walked onto the stage with her golden retriever Buddy 3 months earlier. Emma had been experiencing mysterious fainting episodes that doctors couldn't explain or predict. Today, Buddy could detect her episodes 45 minutes in advance, allowing her family to prevent dangerous falls and ensure her safety. Buddy saved my life, Emma announced to the audience with the straightforward honesty that only children possess. He's my best friend and my guardian angel. The standing ovation that followed lasted nearly 5 minutes, but Mia found herself thinking not about the applause, but about the quiet moment in her father's office 1 year earlier when she had whispered, "Show me to Rex," and changed the course of medical history. The conference concluded with the announcement of the Chun Institute's newest initiative, an international expansion program that would bring canine medical detection training to children's hospitals in 15 countries. Partnerships with medical schools in England, Australia, and Canada were already underway, and preliminary discussions had begun with organizations in developing countries, where expensive medical equipment was often unavailable. Our goal, Mia explained to the international delegates, is not to replace traditional medicine, but to supplement it with detection methods that are accessible, affordable, and available to families, regardless of their economic circumstances. As the conference ended and attendees gathered around the various demonstration stations, Mia found herself in a quiet corner with Tyler, Rex, and her father. Despite all the recognition and scientific validation, these were still the relationships that mattered most to her. "Dr. Mia," Tyler said, using the title he had invented for her. "Rex wants to know when we can start training the next dog." Mia laughed, realizing that Tyler was probably right. Rex had shown remarkable enthusiasm for helping train other dogs, as if he understood that his success could be multiplied to help more children. "Soon," she promised. "There are a lot of kids out there who need what Rex learned to do." Dr. Chun placed his hand on Mia's shoulder. "I've been thinking about what we should call this next phase of the program," he said. "I was considering the 2 words initiative, because everything started with those 2 simple words you taught Rex." "Show me," Mia said quietly, the words that had become both her professional signature and personal philosophy. As if responding to his cue, Rex walked over to Tyler and performed the alert sequence that had started everything. But this time, instead of detecting a medical episode, he was simply demonstrating the behavior that had revolutionized pediatric medicine and saved hundreds of lives. Looking around the room at families whose children were now safe, at medical professionals whose understanding had been forever changed, and at dogs who had discovered their true calling as medical partners, Mia realized that this wasn't the end of their story, it was just the beginning. The 2 words that had once been whispered in secret during midnight training sessions were now being taught in medical schools, spoken in children's hospitals, and transforming lives around the world. What had started as one woman's belief in the unrecognized intelligence of animals had become a global movement that would continue to grow and save lives for generations to come. "Show me" had indeed shown them all what was possible when love, science, and intuition worked together to protect the most vulnerable among us.